Hi everyone, welcome to my review of the Elysian Acoustic Labs Annihilator 2021. These wonderful looking IEMs that comes in around $3,000 from Malaysia. But before I get into this, I just want to sort of apologize for not having dropped a review in a bit of time now. A lot of you who follow my work know that I'm not just a reviewer, and I'm also not someone I don't consider myself to be a professional reviewer because, I have day jobs and a business to run, so this is something that I do for fun. Because I do like making content and sharing with you guys and engaging you guys in conversations, which is why I do what I do. But I haven't gotten around to this, so I have not been very active, and I apologize for that. However, this review is special. This set is very special. I will break this review down into a general discussion of, I'll start with an introduction of what this is. I'll talk about specs, build quality, design, and comfort, and of course, then I'll dive into sound, which is what I like talking about. And general unboxing and stuff, I'll quickly touch upon, and sources that I use, the EQ that I use with my Sony DAP and why, and how it sounds on different sources. This is a FIO BTR7 in case you're wondering if this actually scales or not, and the answer is yes, of course. So let's just jump right in. All right, so in terms of presentation, this IEM, I'm not using stock tips here, but it's a very beautiful looking IEM, as you can see. It comes in with this cable that's terminated in a pentagon, and this is the box that it comes with. So it's a pretty ornate presentation. It's reminiscent of the Sony's Z1R presentations. So it has the whole sort of drawer thingy that goes on with the Z1R as well. Drawers for the IEM. And once you take this out, this another compartment houses the ear tips and stuff, and this, of course, is basically the carrying pouch for the IEM. And the pouch has a nice texture to it. I don't use it because I have sort of a watch box for all my IEMs, and then I carry them around in a sort of a sturdy Pelican case when I need to. So that's what I do. So that's for the presentation. But in general, let's talk about what this is, what this company is about, and where this comes from and all that. So a lot of people call this a unicorn, right? Because it's a rare sight. It's very hard to find. So a unicorn, not in the sense that, it's $1 billion startup, of course, but a unicorn in the sense that it's not easily found. And a lot of people have not heard this because they're made in such small quantities. So Elysian Acoustic Labs is a one-person show. It's created and run by this guy based in Malaysia, and his name is Lee. Lee Kwan Min, I think, is his full name. To ensure proper quality control, he's able to make a very limited number of these IEMs at any given time. So economies of scale play a massive role, and which essentially means that buyers have to wait for months to get this. So that is a huge sort of an issue, I think, because I had to wait for months to get mine. And honestly, with a shout out to Lee for wonderful IEMs, but at the same time, he's not very easy to sort of pin down. And the IEMs are always out of stock. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about how the Annihilator sounds, just to give you a TLDR. Does it sound good? The answer is no. It doesn't sound good. It sounds amazing. Of course, I want to get into sound right away, and that's just sort of my jam. I like talking about sound more than specs or anything else, but let's just do a discussion on specs and build quality, because a lot of you out there will want me to. All right, so with specs wise, first of all, it's got these clear, see-through, translucent or transparent resin shells, which are very nice looking. You can see through this. You can see the dynamic drivers. You can see the 4 BAs, and you can also see the E-stats, the 2 Sonyon E-stats. So it is a nice aesthetic, and then you have the gold-plated faceplates with the logo of the brand. It looks nice. It's it's a pretty nifty look. It's got this this whole all gold sort of aesthetic going on, which for some of you might be a tad blingy, but I think it's tastefully done. And sensitivity is 110 dB, impedance is 40 ohms. It's not the easiest IEM to drive, I have to say. Now, it does not look like it's a boutique IEM in the sense that it does not have any rough DIY vibe. It is very well built. It has excellent fit and finish all around. Edges are smooth, and it comes, as you can see, with the Liquid Links cable which feels very robust, and it does feel expensive other than being an aesthetic match with the IM. Now, it is not the craziest, it's not the crazy, it's not a crazy expensive cable. I hear that this cable is around $350, but you can change the cable if you wanted to. Of course, you might not find something that is as good an aesthetic match as this Liquid Links cable. But keep in mind that these are Pentacon connectors, so these are not your usual 2-pin or MMCX connectors, but that I hear is a good thing. I've not tested the Pentacons too much, but a lot of people will swear by how the Pentacon connectors, as difficult as they are to find, are more sturdy. Now, the shells or the earpieces are definitely on the larger side. They stick out slightly, but honestly, I've had zero fatigue wearing them for long listening sessions. I like everything about this IM when it comes to ergonomics, build, and comfort. The color I was initially somewhat iffy about because I did find the color to be slightly less on the muted side that I tend to go for. But I mean, it is what it is. I've gotten used to the color, and now I quite like it because it is somewhat unique. The cable, as you can see, can be untangled or uncoiled rather easily. So that's wonderful, and it does have that premium sort of heft without being overly heavy. All right. Now, to talk about sound. So I would say that this is a sort of a bright neutral IM. I wouldn't call it V-shaped. I think that it's still one of the most resolving and technical IMs that I've ever heard. It is not the most resolving and technical, but it's still definitely up there with, among the most technical and resolving that I've heard. But it does have a few party tricks, and it does have a few things that it's, very, particularly amazing for. So let's talk about tonality first. Tonality wise, like I said, it's neutral and it's bright. I do think this will be bright for a lot of you out there. It's bright not because of lower treble, which is a nice sort of a thing, because a lot of you, I think, are sensitive to lower treble. As a matter of fact, it has a bit of a dip in the 6K region. However, this has boundless air. But how it's different from other IMs have a lot of air is that the air frequencies here are very extended. It's very replete. However, it's very smooth. So even on the graph, you'll not see any jaggedy edges or anything that's off-putting in terms of how it graphs. But it is very airy, and that gives it a wonderful sound stage, wonderful imaging, air around instruments. It's very crisp treble, and honestly, a lot of other people have pointed this out, that when it comes to E-stats, or Sonyon E-stats rather, that IMs use, oftentimes the implementation leaves a lot to be desired in the fact that oftentimes these EST drivers in IMs can be somewhat blunted, can be somewhat uninteresting, and lack microdynamics. Now, if you want to hear what E-stats sound like, and some of you might have already, you should turn to a Stax. A Stax SR009 or a Stax SR009S, although over-ear headphones will give you a sense of what E-stats can sound like or should sound like with regard to treble. Like, there are other E-stats that have come out since then. For instance, Stax's own X9000 is supposed to be an upgrade over Stax's SR009 or 009S, but I've yet to hear another E-stat that does treble as well as a 009 or 009S. Now, when I say they do treble well, for sure they can be bright of the wrong sources, as can be the case with this. However, with the right sources, the treble is just very, very exciting. For those of you who are treble sensitive, you might not relate with the excitement that treble brings. But for those of you who have heard enough IMs and have a more sophisticated or more cultivated palate, and you can like a rumbly, bassy IM as much as you like a trebly, analytical IM, you'll understand when I say that the treble here is just very lucid, it's very expressive, it's very articulate, just like an E-stat treble should be. It's sparkly for days, and the window into the music has such astonishing clarity that is just, amazing. And only E-stats I've heard in terms of, full-size headphones can do this. The other headphone that this reminds me of is the RAL Requisite SR1A, which is nowadays called the RAL SR1B because of its slight variation in build. So the RAL SR1A or SR1B is very similar sounding to this in that it's just wonderful in mid-range and treble. So tonality-wise, I would say it's bright, but it's not fatiguing. It's not sharp. Mid-range is the second sort of star of the show. The treble is the star of the show. The mid-range is very lucid. It has a lot of clarity because of how the treble is positioned. It's got adequate pinna gain. The mid-range does not have the warmth from the lower mids. It's upper mids focused. So if you have the wrong source, and if you like to EQ, you might want to keep in mind that if you're someone who likes to boost the upper mids, if you're someone who likes to boost the pinna gain region, you should not, or you might not want to boost this, because this has enough pinna gain as it is. Any further boost will make this shouty, I think, but this is not shouty. This is just the right amount of sort of upper mid lift that makes vocals very intimate and very nice and enticing. Female vocals in particular sound magical on this, magical to the point that, I don't know, just phenomenal on this. I do want to talk about some of the tracks that I played with this, so give you a sense of what works and what doesn't. So this is my Sony WM1 ZM2 DAP. And I just want to show you some tracks that I really like with our friend here, with the Annie. Okay, so Norah Jones' Born Again was amazing on this. But let me just pull up the album section of this. So yeah, so this IM is not something that I've enjoyed rock and metal with as much, although you might, because electric guitars do sound phenomenal on this. Drums, not as much. Drums still sound good on this IM, but not as much as, let's say, an IER Z1R from Sony. Now, so Fear Factory is, of course, a thrash metal band, and Fear Factory wasn't as great on this. I did like Asking Alexandria's Alone Again, because this has, you know, a lot of, you know, vocal. It's a very melodic song in some ways. Sofia Karlberg's song was very nice on this. Her whole album, Alternatives, was very nice with the Annie is what I'm going to call it in short. Female vocals is magical on this. I've also liked not Tool as much, not Machine Head or, you know, Killswitch Engage as much, but R.E.M. was amazing on this. Pink Floyd was phenomenal on this. Pink Floyd was just amazing on this IM. Jazz in general, Amy Winehouse was great on this. Norah Jones, like I said, was just astonishing on this. Seal was pretty good on this as well. So even someone like Chris Cornell from Temple of the Dog or Soundgarden, I mean, who has a very chesty voice, but also has a very, you know, his voice can range from chesty to sort of raspy. It sounds raspier on this because it doesn't have the mid-range warmth as this. So with this DAP, I do EQ this a bit, because now to talk about bass, which I've not discussed yet, this has in balance more mid-bass than sub-bass. However, the dynamic driver here is just about decent. I don't think it's sort of the best, you know, dynamic driver that I've heard, and other reviewers have pointed this out, especially Precog, and I do agree with almost everything said in his review. I do think that he is overall perhaps slightly more enamored with this than I am, but I definitely think this is an amazing IM. But anyway, to come back to the bass here is more mid-bassy, but it doesn't still excite you in the punch department. It doesn't have the punch. It doesn't punch like it graphs. And even though on the graph it looks like there's a fair amount of mid-bass energy, I don't perceive any warmth coming from the mid-bass. So this is a different sort of situation where, you know, you might actually want to elevate the mid-bass a bit if you do like getting into EQ. I do also elevate the sub-bass a bit, so I balance the mid-bass and the sub-bass, and I do boost the sub-bass a bit more than I boost the mid-bass on this. And that does round out the bass more, just create a sense of greater bass presence and impact, which then makes it a little more fun with other genres like rock. So on balance or in balance, I would say, guys, that this is a bright-ish tonality. Bass is fine. If you look at the graph, it looks like it's got a bass shelf, especially leaning towards mid-bass, but I don't hear the mid-bass as much. There is punch, but it's not as tactile. The punch is just not as dense or tactile by the Foster dynamic driver as one would hope. From what I understand, Lee has already been informed of this, but, you know, it is what it is. And in many ways, if this had more bass impact, perhaps you'd be slightly more distracted by the bass and would not be able to focus on the treble that you are able to with this. So for you treble heads or mid-range heads, perhaps this is still an amazing IM, which it is, honestly. So in some ways, I do wish that this had a better bass impact. In other ways, I don't. Because if I talk about the RAL SR1A, right? Like, there was a time when I owned the RAL SR1A. I owned the Susvara, and I also owned the Abyss 1266. Now, there were certain songs that I only played with the RAL SR1A, especially like a lot of female vocals, jazz especially, acoustic. Because the RAL SR1A had this intense clarity that was almost unreal. And even with this, the clarity you get is unreal. I mean, images and notes just pop out of thin air. The blackness of background, the clarity is just hair-raising, guys. So much so that I feel like some people may even say that this is not natural sounding because it's just clarity turned up to or dialed up to a 13. It's still amazing. It's super fun. It doesn't have to sound like the artist intended is basically what I would say. So I think this is able to achieve the tuning that it goes for. And the fact that the bass here is not the dominant part of the show, the fact that the bass is not the star of the show when it comes to tuning is fine by me. It's still decent dynamic driver bass. So the bass is not soft, it's not slow, it doesn't have a BA timbre, it has decent decay, it's got everything. It's just that there are other IMs in this kilobuck range that do bass better. However, you don't buy this for bass. I did not buy this for bass. I honestly bought this for mid-range and treble, but the bass just supports the rest of the tonality. Moving on to technical performance, guys. Firstly, soundstage. This has exceptional soundstage and imaging. I think the treble presentation really helps with imaging because you get a sense of very distinct images popping out of a very black background. It's got great stage width, very impressive stage depth and stage height. Of course, if you were to nitpick stage height, you would find IMs that do better stage height and all that, right? Like the 64 Audio U12T does have better stage depth and other IMs as well. But this is such an all-rounder when it comes to staging and imaging that I think is marvelous. It does sound out of the head occasionally, like especially with this guy, which is famous for his staging. The combination here is phenomenal, guys. Also because this has that intense clarity and is very treble-oriented, and the Sony DAB tends to be a bit warm and very lush, very artois sounding. I feel like the pairing here is just amazing. Resolution-wise, I think very few IMs can come close to this one when it comes to mid-range resolution and treble resolution. But for overall resolution, I would say that this is on par with other IMs out there. So the Odin, I think, is a pretty fair IM to compare this with, or even the Noble Audio Ragnar, or even the Jewel Aroma Jewel from Aroma Audio. So all these, I think, are pretty much on the same league. Of course, some of these IMs are closer to $5,000, and this is $3,000. In that sense, you might say that this is slightly more value for money. But of course, most people who buy these IMs that in the $5,000 range often buy them used. So I would say they're pretty much in a similar price bracket. And this does live up to the price bracket in terms of resolution and then some. Mid-range resolution, like I said, is everything. You'll not miss a pluck of a guitar. You'll hear, lips parting when people are singing. Phenomenal. It's just extremely, extremely resolving. I would compare the resolution here with high-end headphones, honestly, because it's just wow. Timbre is okay. I don't think it's the final word on timbre. With the Sony DAB, it does sound natural. However, with the FIO BTR7, and I've tried this with other FIO DABs, the timbre doesn't sound as natural. So that's worth keeping in mind. It is not the final word on timbre, but it's not artificial sounding by any means. It's fair. It's fairly nice. It's fairly decent. It's fairly good. Now, in terms of speed and dynamics, it's super fast because of the treble presentation. It's basically what an ESAT done right sounds like, right? It's like an SR009S from Stax in IM form, or a RAL SR1A or SR1B, which is a ribbon headphone, in an IM form. So it's got lightning speed, breathtaking speed. This IM misses nothing. It resolves everything, especially in mid-range and treble. It's fast. It's hyper fast. The transients are just very, very fast. But at the expense of that speed, which is not inevitable, but in this case, you do sacrifice the punch, the microdynamic contrast. So you don't get that, sort of that rollicking, punchy sound that you might get, let's say, from a Sony IER Z1R or a Legend Evo or Legend X, for example, right? But overall, for technicalities, it's up there, guys. So there are people, a lot of my friends, who think this is the most technical IM they've heard, and I understand why. I would say it's among the top 3 most technical IMs that I've ever heard. Resolution-wise, yes, there might not be anything else that's up to this level. But yeah, I mean, all these are high-end IMs are pretty similar, I think, when it comes to technical performance. So, finally, source-wise, guys, I mean, I've tried this with different DAPs. When I tried this with the Sony, I loved it, and I wanted to see what this sounded like with other DAPs. So I did audition this with the iBasso DX320, iBasso DX320X, the Kain N8 Mark II, channeling M9. The only high-end DAP that I've not tried this with is the Hibi RS8. I'm yet to hear the Hibi RS8. I am going to CanJam Singapore in a couple of weeks, so I do want to audition the Hibi RS8 with this, because just like the Hibi, this also has an impact on the bass in the sense that this DAP tends to bring out the bass better of IEMs. It rounds out the bass, gives it a very solid foundation. This is a warm, somewhat bassy DAP, right? That can sometimes lack a bit of pinna gain. So with this DAP, I find that I add a couple of dBs to the upper mid range on every IM that I try, not with this. So that to me suggests that this has sufficient pinna gain. With this, the soundstage widens a lot, so I really like the combination here, particularly for a soundstage. Resolution is amazing with this combination. You miss nothing in the music. Now, when you move on to something like a BTR7 from FIO, which is an amazing Bluetooth device, the BTR7, I think, honestly deserves its own review, and I've been using this on my walks every day with different IMs, and it drives every IM well, and just synergizes well with most of my IMs, but not with this. The combination here doesn't sound right. It sounds bright in all the wrong ways. It sounds a bit spiky and trebly and overall unpleasant, and the timbre is just not, it just doesn't work with the timbre here. So if you have a FIO DAP, you might want to, you might either not hold on, you might audition first. You might audition first before buying this, because FIO does have a house sound, and I think that this retains a FIO house sound, which is lovely in its own way, but doesn't work so well with the Annie 2021 at least. So that's worth keeping in mind. Guys, Lee is working on a 2023 version. It's a prototype as of the time of filming this review, so keep an eye out for that. That might have a different take on bass, but I do think that every time you change something, you lose something else when it comes to IMs, because IMs you do hear sound as a coherent whole. What you don't get in bass here, what you might in the 2023 version, you definitely might not get with the mid-range and upper mid-range and treble. And if you like upper mid-range and treble, if you like jazz music, female vocals, etc., this is honestly a home run and then some. So that's it from me, guys. I hope this review was useful, and stay tuned for my next one. And if you like this review, give it a like and subscribe if you have not. Stay safe. Bye-bye.